Hello, welcome to the stream. I could not come up with a video for this evening, and I didn't want to do nothing today, so I figured I would set a little 25-minute timer or something and just go live for the time it might take me to throw together a video. Because let's say it's a 10-minute video, it would take me 10 minutes to film it, presumably. Usually I do things in one take and then whip it together, upload it, blah blah blah. So I figured it'd probably take me 25 minutes for average video. So I figured can't come up with a video topic for the day. Racked my brain, couldn't think of anything I really felt like doing. So I figured going live would be an alternative because I don't really mind going live. It doesn't really stress me out at all. So yeah, I might just keep that in my back pocket. Of just if I can't come up with an idea, we go live, and I can just do office hours and answer questions. Uh, Congrats on the 4K. Well, thank you, man. I appreciate it. The road to 5K is on. I don't know how many I am. I think I've uploaded like 350 YouTube videos or some shit. So it's been a long slog, and I assume it will continue to be. Uh, yeah, I don't expect the channel to blow up anytime soon. So the long grind to 5K begins. I was thinking about making a video going over like what I've identified to be core principles of programming for myself, not for everybody. I thought maybe the idea was if I could show, hey, these are the kind of core boxes I have to check to keep my bench moving forward, my overhead press moving forward, my squat moving forward, my deadlift moving forward. And I usually, when I deviate from this, my progress slows down. Maybe it could give you guys some ideas for similar principles for yourself, as long as I made the video being really clear that I'm not saying these are universal principles. So I was thinking about doing that, and I was working on. There's a whiteboard down there. I was writing these down for my own good, just to make sure I have a couple boxes to check every training cycle to make sure that all of my lifts are kind of progressing alongside one another, rather than one thing going good, forgetting my core principles on another lift. Congratulations, bunch of emojis. You made the Megalodon press program, which has been great. Any chance on squat and deadlift? Yeah, eventually. Making pre-made programs stresses the fuck out of me because my name is on them, and I would like them to be good if my name is on them. And anything I write, I'm like, yeah, I feel like this will work for most people, but my name is on it, and people are going to view it as like my program. And if it doesn't work for them, that's on me. So I hold myself to at least a reasonably high standard when it comes to pre-mades, which is why they stress me out, and I do not do them often. I'll probably get around to at least making one for the squat and one for the deadlift. Um, that hypothetically would probably be run alongside that Megalodon program. Um, that way, at least I have options. But yeah, always stresses me out. Well, hello, Paris. Congratulations on the 4K subs. I was just about to suggest what you're talking about now. Oh yeah, the programs. That's whom. Yeah, no, those shit stress me out. But I'll make at least a deadlift one and a squat one, and try to orient them in a way that they could be stacked on top of the Megalodon press program, and thus you can kind of piece together a generic program based on how I do stuff. Hi, Austin. Well, thank you. I'm very happy at the 4K. I think 5K is going to take a while, but we made it, baby. Um, I was thinking of maybe trying to do like the question answering videos every 100 subs. And if I ever at a rate of gaining faster than that, spacing it out, but that just being like a built in, like every so and so often I automatically do those. And then I might continue just doing the live whenever I can't come up with a video idea. That way I'm kind of checking that box of making a video every day, even when I don't have a video idea. And this could just be some time to answer you guys' training questions. Do you think a weightlifting belt which tapers would be non-trivially worse than a wider belt for hypertrophy and strength? Um, for hypertrophy, no, I don't really think that matters a ton. Um, no, I don't think that's going to make a meaningful difference in terms of your hypertrophy training. Whether you have a like a dinkier weightlifting style belt, a bodybuilding belt, I don't think that's going to make a tremendous difference in your bodybuilding training. Um, but in terms of strength training, depends how we're defining strength training. Our strength training is defined by trying to lift the most weight uh, possible within the rules of powerlifting. If that's how we personally like to define strength training, then yeah, it probably would have at least a measurable effect. That being said, I really wouldn't stress about it. I don't think that the biggest thing standing between you and getting better would be I don't think that would be your belt. I think that you're going to be able to get that extra little boost in intra-abdominal pressure even with a tapered belt. Um, Also, congratulations, Big Hoss. Well, thank you. Uh, it's still weird to me that people think of me as large because I've always thought of myself as quite small. Because when I started lifting, I was quite small. I never really registered that I've gotten bigger. And then if you look at any strongman I'm competing against, I'm still small, especially because I enter the super heavyweight category when I do shows. So I feel quite small always. Um, kind of kind of catches me by surprise when people are like, "Oh, Sam's a big guy." I was like, "No, my brother's a big guy. I'm the small. I'm the small one of the two." Is usually how I've always thought of it. Uh, what do you think about Jordan Peters' top set back off training to failure for hypertrophy? Um, I think it's solid. I think that it's very good that Jordan preaches standardization of form being a necessary part of progressive overload, because I think that's a common pitfall of beat the books type dudes is you're beating the books without a standardized quality. So it's not actually clear whether any true mechanical overload is happening if you're using compromised form to lift more and more and more weight. And I like that JP is very vocal that that's not what he's advocating for. I think the logbook is a great accountability system for effort. I don't necessarily always think that people conceptualize it well. It's not that if you don't do one more rep than last week, you're not going to grow. If you trained hard, you're likely to grow. You've probably created at least enough magnitude of stimulus if you train really hard. And the notebook is more of an accountability system for that effort rather than, oh, this is the necessary driver. But that being said, I like it. Not going to hear me complain about it. I do think that your average person who is not a big, strong freak like JP is will probably need to do a bit more some working volume per body part than someone big and extremely neurally efficient like him might have to do to get better. But I like it. What's your thoughts on hip thrust or abduction machine? I ask because I'm tired on those being so overused for bigger glutes. I would say that the abductor machine probably not likely to be uh, the bread and butter of building your glutes. Mechanically speaking, my understanding of the biomechanics, that's not likely to be a real exercise that's going to put a ton of mass on your glutes. That being said, the hip thrust, I mean, there's a good bit of literature that it's a solid motion. It's a way to load a hip hinging pattern where you're not going to be limited by your spinal erectors. We don't have a ton of axial fatigue and loading going on there. Um, so you're able to kind of work to the capacity of your glutes um, maximally or more maximally because we're not going to be limited by that like axial loading. Unfortunately, I don't think that hip thrusts are at all overrated as a glute exercise. I think they work pretty darn well, especially if paired with some exercises that place more of an emphasis on the stretch position. Because I've talked on this channel a couple times. We've got some like preliminary research that probably needs to be duplicated a couple more times that suggests that like the stretch position is more stimulating of hypertrophy than the contracted position. So training at a greater average muscle length, even if we're doing the same range of motion, if that range of motion is at a greater average muscle length, so something like a seated hamstring curl versus or better than a lying hamstring curl. Um, so if we follow that principle, maybe something with a comparable range of motion and that also doesn't have those limitations, that's going to be training the glute for more of a stretch position on a set to set basis might be a little bit better than the hip thrust. But I think pairing something like a squat or a split squat with a hip thrust is a very, very comprehensive glute workout. Really long-winded way to answer that. Congratulations on the 4K sub. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Squad. Um, yeah. Also, I put up a Q&A thing on my Instagram. So if you follow me there, you're welcome to drop a question on there. Once this live is over, if you think of something that you wish Jazz can hear, you can throw it in there. I'll probably try it. We'll see. Alex says the same thing about the stretch position. I have no idea who Alex is, but I tend to agree with him. Bromley? Yeah, that's his name. You have to alert me what Alex this is. Um, there's probably many Alexes in the world that tend to agree with that. Yo, greetings. Welcome to the live stream. Where we think we're going to put in about 25 minutes. Kirst will probably be getting home kind of soon from getting groceries, and then I got to toss down meal number 5 and go walk the dog. So that'll be exciting. Um, Would it be better to do the same exact workout twice a week or change it for one? If change it, what is important to be different on the other day? Kind of quiet. Can you turn up your output? I don't think I can. I think I'm connected to these because the microphone on my phone is busted. Um, and this is what we've got. I will try to talk louder for you though. That's the best I got. I do not know how to use a computer to this day, and I'm doing this from my phone. But yeah, if you're going to run, let's say you're training a muscle group twice a week, depends if we're talking strength or hypertrophy, depends if we're looking to do like a daily undulating approach. That question can kind of branch out into a whole bunch of different sub questions. But if you're able to progress the same workout twice a week, I would probably just keep going with the same workout verbatim. And then once your rate of progression slows down, we're assuming you're newer to the gym probably. Once your rate of progression slows down, we can go A workout, B workout. If our goals are hypertrophy oriented, we could probably switch out equivalent motions. So one day is squats, one day is hack squats, or something like that. Progress A, progress B, and kind of draw things out to allow yourself a more steady rate of progression. If we're talking strength, we could potentially do primary exercise in one day, a variation that like works your weaknesses or highlights poor motor patterns on the B day. We could do a daily undulating approach and have heavy day A, volume day B. There's lots of things we could do there. It just kind of depends on too many things to say. Alex at Alpha Destiny. I did not know that was his name. I can't say I've watched a ton of his videos, but if he agrees that the stretch position is probably more stimulative, then I would tend to agree with him. Think about my output. Hopefully, I'll try to yell. We'll see if that works. Um, Recently, when I squat and bench heavier, I get pain in my bicep, not the muscle, but the tendon. Uh, it's normal. Anything I can do to alleviate. More than likely, you're holding too much weight in your hand when you're squatting heavy, especially if you're squatting low bar. It's very easy to do. We cram that bar nice and low on our back. We have a ton of weight sitting in our hands. It's very tempting because the weight is going to feel very light on your back if you just jam it into your hands with a very narrow grip. Generally speaking, it kind of happens on the squat and then you feel it when you go to bench. It's not that the bench is necessarily causing this bicep tendinopathy. It's usually that it's a remnant, like damage from the squat, cramming a bunch of weight, having a bunch of weight sitting in our hands in a position that's externally rotated, uh, often leads to that bicep tendinopathy. And the solution is working on your external rotation mobility, working on your T-spine mobility, potentially taking your grip a little bit wider, manually cueing your back tightness rather than relying on taking an extremely narrow grip to automatically create that back tightness. We take it out a little bit. We have to create it manually. Yeah, that's a bit of a pain, but that way we can not be having this huge upward and forward pressure into the bar. We can almost think about pulling the bar back and down and alleviating that pressure that's going to load through here, potentially give us that bicep tendinopathy. Not 100% of the time. I'm not a physical therapist, but most often I would say when you notice like bicep pain on the bench press, it's rooted in squatting prior heavy and bearing too much load in the hands. That's just my observations of this. In terms of hypertrophy, when should I add different variations? What signs you look for to tell you it's time to change? I mean, if you're making good, consistent progression on a good motion that's well selected, you're getting sore. Not that soreness is a direct proxy for hypertrophy. There's plenty of things you could do that would make you quite sore that would not be particularly good for hypertrophy. But I do think that if we're doing reasonable training, because people say, oh, run a marathon, you'll be sore. That doesn't mean it's good. That's fair. But if we are doing training that is reasonable and looks good on paper, uh, soreness might correlate with what we know is going to be a big driver of hypertrophy, which is exposing ourselves to a novel stimulus, doing more than you have done in the past. That tends to make people sore, and that also tends to make people grow. So it's not going to be a direct gauge of whether a workout was good. Just because you're not sore doesn't mean you didn't have a great productive workout and are going to make adaptations from it. And just because you got sore doesn't mean it's automatically a good workout. But if we're being reasonable and doing a reasonable workout routine, it might be a good sign. Um, but when to rotate exercises, I mean, usually when progression gets to the point where you need to compromise your form to see any meaningful progression, even then we could rotate our target rep range and that would be fine. But if you fit, like if you're like, man, I'm not really feeling my quads anymore on this exercise. I dropped the weight back, I slowed down. I'm not really feeling that mind muscle connection anymore. That might be a sign to rotate the exercise rather than rotate the rep target. But there is no hard and fast rule. right? And the nice part is because these motor patterns are kind of loading the same muscles with a similar resistance curve for a similar range of motion, we do have the leisure of rotating them kind of when we feel like it. There's such a thing as rotating them too often, for sure. If you change it every week, it's going to be hard to see whether you're making meaningful progression forward. But if you swap your hack squat for a full range of motion leg press and you're working similarly hard for similar volumes, um, we have that flexibility. It's not going to make a tremendous difference, and that's a good thing. Hopefully, live becomes a weekly thing. Very knowledgeable, man. Well, thank you. I think I mentioned earlier. I try to post a video every day. Sometimes I cannot come up with a video topic that I feel particularly passionate about, and I don't really care to make videos that I don't give a shit about. That's not really on my to-do list. Couldn't come up with one today, so I figured I would just sit down for however much time I was going to make a video and go live. So that might be the play because I'm perfectly comfortable going live. It doesn't really stress me out at all. Cameras aren't real people to me. So I might be coming on here anytime I don't have a video idea in my head, which is quite often. So might be more than weekly. Got a weird question here. Why are most of the strong people bald or really short hair? Um, well, bluntly, PEDs often one of the side effects is baldness. If you were never going to go bald to begin with, probably PEDs aren't going to make you go bald unless you're going crazy. But it speeds things up for most people. And then also, like this guy said, uh, most men are going to experience some level of balding, and they're going to cut their hair short to account for it. I think it's just a little bit of a selection bias. Most people are reaching their strength peak 25 or later, and lots of guys 25 or later are experiencing some level of balding. And then, like the guy said, PEDs on top of that certainly doesn't help. But even on the natural side of the sport, the guys I don't believe are doping, just a lot of bald people. They're out there. I think that also the time to peak strength, by the time you know who a lot of guys are, they're a little bit later in their life than maybe you are. So they're statistically kind of likely to be balding a bit. But I don't know. I would say that's probably the main two reasons. But congratulations on the 4K, King. Thank you. I appreciate it, man. Large majority of men are going to have some level of balding. Adding gear, it usually gets worse. That's a perfectly reasonable assessment. I tend to agree with you. I myself, I knew I was going to go bald since I was a wee lad. My dad went bald in college. My grandpa went bald in college. My uncle went bald in college. So I started shaving my head when I was like, I've shaved my head most of my life. I had some pretty hair going at one point in college. But most of my life, especially back when I boxed, headgear gets gross. So I would always just buzz my head with a one guard. And I still buzz my head with one guard. So I got accustomed to how I look bald long time ago because I knew it was coming, and that made it not very hurtful when it happened. So I think knowing it was coming was big for me, and also not having a goofy shaped head, round melon. That's always been nice. Congrats on 4K. Thank you, man. I see you in my comments all the time. I appreciate your support. Do you have any tips on how to adapt strength program principles to calisthenics moves? I need to take some time off legs to prevent injury, so I'll use the opportunity to train OAC and handstand. I don't know what OAC is off the top of my head. Enlighten me here. But as far as taking strength training principles, I'm assuming we need weighted calisthenics. I don't know what OAC is, so I'll wait and shut my trap. But usually we're going to be looking to program off of absolute load, so total body weight plus uh, added load makes more sense if we're ever using percentages. We should one arm chins. I'm assuming you're going to do weighted chins alongside those. If you're not, I would recommend it. It's a good general strength training motion. It's going to have at least a reasonable correlation there. And if we are doing something like weighted dips, weighted chins, programming off of total load, if we're using percentages, generally makes more sense, right? Because it's like realistically, 50% of body weight plus 90 isn't actually 45 in terms of what we're demanding our muscles to do. It's also probably not exactly body weight plus the load because we're not moving our forearm or hands, but for basing our program off of total load, at least keeping that in mind can be quite helpful in terms of like how we're staggering our progressions, right? So it's like, let's say we want to make a 5% jump in weight per week. I would often factor in the person's body weight when assessing that. Or like their max plus their body weight. Chins. Any exercises you like for bigger forearms? I mean, if forearm size is the goal, wrist curls are probably the move. We generally think that volume and range of motion and proximity to failure is kind of what is going to be the driver of like these like main things we're going to look to drive hypertrophy. Um, grip work is great and it might give you some good gains, but it's not going to compare to something with a solid range of motion more than likely. So wrist curls are going to be the move. Traditional reps and sets and proximity to failure. The forearms aren't fundamentally any different than any other muscle. So what's going to make them grow is probably not fundamentally different from any other muscle. Hey, Curse, warning, I'm on a live stream. Don't do anything dumb. Thank you. Uh, let's see. But I would say that just anecdotally, what I like is grip training. Farmers, weighted hangs for time. If you want to make your weighted hangs for time harder, you can put a bar up on top of the rack or put the catches up high. That way, the bar is able to roll, right? Because it's just like a barbell. The reason holding a barbell double overhand is quite difficult, or a dumbbell is quite difficult, is because it's trying to roll your hands open. Whereas you can hold more weight on something like a trap bar or a farmer's handle because it's pulling straight downward and not trying to roll your fingers open. Well, if we're trying to make something harder on our grip, we can actually take advantage of that exact same thing. So we can put the bar up on the rack and do our holds on a bar that's able to roll and try to roll our hands open. So you can have a guy who could do easily, he could hang for 1 minute from a pull up bar. But if you put him up on this bar that can rotate, he might be down at 30, 20 seconds sometimes. And I got this from Ode Haugen, so the OG grip master himself, uh, as a way to progress those and make them more difficult. I tend to very much like weighted hangs as a grip exercise because we're getting a little bit of decompression of our spine. We're not getting like heavy axial like loading in the downward direction that we would normally do if we did a hold from the rack on a barbell, if we did a farmer's hold, all of these things. We've got some extra loading on our spine that we have to account for ultimately what's just grip work. Whereas if we hang from a bar, we don't have to program around that very much, which is a nice way to fit in a lot more grip work and just be limited by the recovery capability of this rather than your spine. So I like those. They give me a sick forearm pump. I wouldn't say on a set per set basis. That's how you get huge forearms, but those are my favorite. Referring back to my question, you hit the nail on the head. My bench has somewhat stagnated and I can't really feel my chest in benching. Is it smart to replace it benching with, let's say, dips? I would probably, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily replace it with dips. I might try maybe a low incline. I might try dumbbells, something a little bit more similar in motor pattern. Because usually when we're looking to make in a hypertrophy focused program, if we're making substitutions, usually they're going to be um, similar exercise slots. And something like a dip, I would often kind of categorize more as I would a close fit, right? It's more of a tricep primary exercise. It also happens to get a good bit of chest, so fit that into your split as you may. But I would probably look to have something maybe like a incline bench, a low incline bench, maybe with dumbbells. Maybe if you've got a chest press machine you really, really like, these could be equivalent exercise spots. But that would be my thoughts. Or should I drop the weight and focus on rep quality slash tempo? You could do that as well. You could take a look at your form and say, hey, why am I not feeling my chest? Let me just address how I'm doing my bench press and get very skilled at this motion. And skilled for a strength focused athlete is going to be how to move the most weight from A to B. And skilled for a hypertrophy focused athlete is how to tax the pec fibers the most with a given weight on the bar. Someone who's really, really skilled at bodybuilding training might be able to still stimulate their pecs with 3 plates, even if they could bench 4 plates. They're very skilled at their task, which is trying to maximally tax a specific muscle group. So that's kind of the difference between like high level hypertrophy training and high level strength training. Uh, men, even with completely bald uh, pates, were perceived to be more masculine, dominant, taller, and even about 13% stronger than those with full heads of hair. You heard it here. That's a fact. I agree with that. It boosts your power. I agree. It's a sign of masculinity. That's what I'm going to tell myself. Like I said, I came to terms with the fact that this shit was going early when I was probably about 11 when I put together. I was like, this is not going to stick around. I saw like family photos of my dad and my grandpa, and so I started bracing myself then. So the decade lead up to it really made it not too bad. Also, take notes. If you're gonna go bald, come to terms with it. Start shaving your head. Get used to how you look. Uh, yeah, I mean that would be my advice. didn't really feel like fighting that uphill battle of spamming finasteride, having to worry about potential hormone fluctuation from that. Certainly not worth it to me. I've got a wonderful girlfriend. I don't really need to be pretty anymore. So let the hair go. No need to worry about fluctuating hormone levels any more than I already do. At least you weren't caught off guard. That's how I view it, right? It wasn't like a shock. It's not like my dad and my grandpa and my uncle, they all have hair. And I just got buff. It's going to hit Max rough. Uh, I don't think he's as mentally prepared as I am, though he's shaved his head a million times. He's fine with how he looks with his head shaved, but I think he likes his hair more than I liked my hair. What's a good progression model for squats or overhead press? That's a very open-ended question. There's a million good progression models for squats and overhead press. There's a ton of them. How should I go about reps and sets, adding weight, etc.? I can usually progress workout. I can still progress workout to workout. That's really open-ended. I don't know your goals. There's lots of them that are going to work. The fact that you're able to progress from workout to workout means just about anything is going to work. I do like that pseudo daily undulating approach of taking a lower target rep range on day A and a higher target rep range on day B. So maybe you're targeting fives on day one and day eights on day two, and kind of trying to progress linearly within the constraints of good technique. But there's a billion ways you could do that. All right, I'm gonna wrap this one up soon. We're almost at the 30-minute mark, which was the target I set for myself. I am in a sort of power building situation, trying to increase the bench. Would you do a heavier and a lighter day, a normal bench progression, and do bench variations on my second upper day? I don't think you necessarily even need to do a variation, right? We could do like a traditional, hey, we start at 60, 63%. Each session, the weight on the bar bumps 2%. We end at 95% for a single, and then we maybe rest for a couple of days, and then we test our max. It doesn't necessarily need to be day one's comp, day one's variation. We could just do comp and just take intermediate weights in our big global progression. That's perfectly viable and works quite well. Or we could go, we have a standard progression. Day one is our comp bench, progressing up towards 95%, and then rest of it, and then test our max. And day two is Larson, working up towards 95% of the Larson max, not our comp max, 95% of the Larson max, rest, test, and that would work very well as well. Just depends on whether the bench variation is going to really effectively target a core motor pattern of yours or a core strength subset of yours, or if you can't really find a variation you feel is really hammering a perceived weakness of yours, if you can't find that, you might as well just do 2 regular bench days. I remember you said the biggest thing you struggled with was getting in quality sleep. Have you implemented anything to help with that? Maybe a two-part sleep schedule. I have messed with a two-part sleep schedule, and it's very hard and like precarious for me to maintain that being my kind of rhythm. But I have had a lot of success with that. I used to every single night at the same time get up and eat a meal and do some chores, and then go back to bed. And actually found that my sleep quality was actually very high when I was doing that. I take magnesium glycinate every single night. I take GABA every single night, and I take glycine every single night. And those are the ones that I've noticed help with my sleep latency and sleep quality. I do a lot to work on it, but I have tried the two-part sleep schedule and have had moderate success with it. Not that I recommend that to people who could sleep normally. Congratulations on 4K. How would I go about improving core bracing? What would be your general recommendations? Thank you so much, Sam. I would probably be looking to tax your strength endurance on your core often. That way we kind of have that good endurance quality. We have the strength quality, so we hit those two prerequisites. We know what it means, like know what it feels like to maintain abdominal tightness for a prolonged period of time. Because first we need to create abdominal tightness, and then we need to fill that kind of rigid cavity with air to create the pressure. Because if we don't create that tightness, it just expands outward. Our intra-abdominal pressure is not going to reach the peak that it should. So we need to create that tightness and then fill it with air, focusing on. So yeah, step A might be kind of creating that endurance and that strength and knowing what it feels like to keep the midsection tensed for about 1 minute. And then we're going to focus on learning to breathe low down into our stomach, not up into our chest, kind of breathe low. Eventually, we can start getting into more advanced concepts of circumferential breathing. So not just breathing forward into our belt or our abs, but we're also trying to breathe sideways into our obliques. I know this sounds like hippy dippy shit, but it ends up working, I promise. Breathing backwards, pushing back into our spine. That perception of breathing back into my spine was what suddenly made me able to deadlift a lot more often. And I felt the deadlifts were much less taxing on my lower back. And doing drills like dead bugs, or 90-90 hip lifts, where we're just going to be in this position, kind of tucking our pelvis, lifting our tailbone up off the ground, and focusing on, again, breathing low circumferentially. That would be kind of step two. I might make a video on this. I don't really have a hard and fast way. Bracing is complicated. It takes everybody forever to at least kind of get it, and we could all get better at it. But those would be my thoughts. All right, I'm gonna sign off before Kirsty gets mad at me. We're gonna go take Ode out for a walk after I throw down meal 5. I hope this counts as my video for the day. Appreciate you boys for watching. Yeah,